So I hate being negative about things, I really do. I've sort of aimed this channel towards looking at the good things about the franchises that I adore, the best parts, the best scenes. The reason I do that is because I prefer looking for the good in things. I don't dismiss the flaws that something has, I always try to be fair in that regard, I just tend to lean towards optimism. But I do think that fair criticism is something that is really important. Constructive criticism is the best way to move forward and learn from experiences. It's a chance to look at something and hopefully with care and respect, point out the things that didn't work, that fell flat, with the knowledge that potentially it can get better in the future. I really wanted to love the new season of Doctor Who. I was so gassed for this soft reboot aiming at bringing in a whole new audience. I desperately wanted it to reignite the love of this classic show in the hearts of those who had tuned out, whilst also enthusing those that were still loyal. If you watched my last video, I shared my thoughts on the first half of the season. TLDR, I thought the first 2 episodes were weak. They had good ideas in them, but I thought they were half-baked. They didn't have the impact that the opening of a new season should have. On the flip side, I thought that episodes 3 and 4 were the opposite. Boom is a genuinely great episode with great writing, giving us the chance to get to know our 2 protagonists more, develop their friendship, whilst also exploring interesting themes about war and profit. One of the best episodes of Who in years. I said I enjoyed 73 Yards, that it was interesting and had a different vibe, but I also stated that my overall opinion of the episode would depend on how the season played out, as there were many questions that needed to be answered for it to work. And I ended that video being optimistic, looking forward to what was to come, hoping that the rest of the season would have the same quality as these 2 episodes. And so how did it turn out? Well, unfortunately, it didn't deliver in the way I wanted it to. It's been just over a month since the season finished, and I've had time to consolidate my thoughts. So join me in this video as we look at the newest season of Doctor Who and try to unpack why it was so frustratingly disappointing. Hey guys, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you like this sort of content, and ding that bell if you want to get notified about new uploads. I'm going to be real with you, I've had a crazy month with family and job related stuff, so I'm really sorry I haven't uploaded in a while. I plan to get back on the grind and get into a rhythm. Anyways, enough about me, let's get back to the video. So I think we should go through each of the last 4 episodes one by one before we dive into a bit of general analysis about the season as a whole. So we begin with Dot and Bubble. Now this might be up there with Boom as the best episode of the season in my opinion. Doctor Who has a real knack for creating amazing Doctor Light episodes without the Doctor in them that much. Think Blink and Turn Left. And though this isn't a true Doctor Light episode because he is in it throughout, we do spend the majority of our time with Lindy, as she is our point of reference in this unknown world. It's through her eyes that we experience the world of Fine Time, this idyllic and utopian world that turns out not to be really any of them, that is driven by social media, highlighting its most intrusive and damaging aspects. Lindy herself is not a likeable character. She's annoying, stuck up, and entitled. She is selfish. We see her sacrifice Ricky to save her life, effectively killing the man that has up to this point helped her out and saved her. She's not supposed to be a good person. She's supposed to represent a whole society of people who only care for themselves, people who do not look out for other people, and so it's even more poignant when we see the Doctor and Ruby helping her regardless of how she is treating them. I think the episode is paced well, being introduced to the premise and Lindy herself, with the Doctor and Ruby dropping in and out, being brushed aside until Lindy learns that they are telling the truth. The big slug monsters are also pretty cool. They look very practical, which makes their presence on screen feel more real and gross. We also see hints of the underlying racism within this society come to the surface throughout the episode, completely ignoring the Doctor when he tries to connect but giving Ruby the chance to speak, suggesting the aliens are to do with the Doctor, saying he is going to be so disciplined, The allegory of the bubble itself is strong. The idea of isolating yourself in your own worldview, the idea of an echo chamber, not being challenged, not opening your eyes to the real world around you. It's a truth that we all experience in this modern age of social media, which itself perpetuates these very aspects of the fine time society. Lindy needs to take the bubble down to survive. She needs to work with the Doctor and Ruby. She needs to cast away her prejudices and bigotry to actually understand and realise what is going on. But the tragedy is that as soon as she has been saved, not by her own actions, not really by her own doing, she goes right back to that bigotry, to that racism. And this all leads to the final scene in this episode that is beautifully tragic. We see the Doctor do what he's always done, attempt to save people no matter what. We see him offer to help, but in this moment that offer is rejected. Not because of anything he has done, but by who he is, the way he looks. Replace the 15th Doctor with any other iteration of the character since Hartnell, and I'm pretty sure that the people of Fine Time would accept that offer, accept the Doctor's help. But this time he's being rejected and discriminated purely based on the colour of his skin. And his reaction is deeply emotional. It comes from a place of confusion, a place of bewilderment, a place of anger. And Ncuti gives a wonderful performance, channeling all of those thoughts so viscerally. It is the first time we see the Doctor get treated like this, and it highlights the idiocy of the people like Lindy. How stupid are those who would turn down the promise of life, the promise of being saved and being helped, being assured their ability to move on and flourish purely because of their bigotry. They would rather risk death than accept help from a person who looks different to them. And then the episode ends. No happy resolution, no sense of growth or learning from Lindy. It ends on a gut punch. Fantastic. Rouge is an interesting episode. It's obviously going for the Bridgerton vibe, that very idea of Bridgerton is baked into the story itself. The premise is fine, the writers are obviously having fun with the idea of alien cosplayers, the Chulda, beings that infiltrate human gatherings as a means of sadistic play, with a renegade and closed-off bounty hunter who has been hired to kill them thrown into the mix. I just don't think it really lands. Ironically, it kind of feels like Doctor Who dressing itself up as something that it isn't and just looking a little bit off, a little bit cheap and hastily thrown together, like a bad cosplay. We get Ruby going off on her own and mingling in the affairs, quite literally, of the party guests, whilst the Doctor goes off with Rouge. Bear in mind that this is the third episode in a row where the Doctor and Ruby have had little time to properly interact with each other and grow that relationship that, to me, still feels way too artificial and not really that real. I think the Doctor's plot, which revolves around Rouge, is better than Ruby's, and it allows Ncuti to really show off his ability to channel charisma and charm. It's nice to see the Doctor flirting again and having a bit of fun. He's charming and playful, and there is a great dynamic between him and Rouge. It brings out a side of the Doctor that we don't always see. Towards the end of the episode, when the Doctor thinks that Ruby is dead, we see our first real glimpse of the 15th Doctor's darkness. Which, if you know me, I absolutely love. I also really believed the panic he has when he realises that he himself has doomed Ruby to the same fate as the other Chulda. It's raw. His inability to sacrifice the friend that he's promised to protect is so true to the Doctor's character. His love for his friends is paramount, so Rouge does what he needs to do, but it all feels a bit hollow, as I still don't really believe that the Doctor and Ruby are that close and that good friends. I don't know, maybe I'm just being pessimistic here because I don't really like Ruby Sunday, but I just don't think the whole situation really lands. To begin with, I wasn't sold on Rouge as a character, but upon re-watching the episode, he's really grown on me. I think that there is this interesting dynamic between him and the Doctor. He isn't some major MacGuffin, he isn't anyone important, he's just a guy in the universe that happens to be brave and charming, and he's just doing his job. You can see why he's compared to Captain Jack. However, I do think their relationship is fast-tracked. They fall for each other very quickly, and I think it could have benefited to see them grow closer over a couple of episodes. His last line, "Find me," feels like the end of a season-long arc of these characters getting to know each other, falling in love. Rogue hits the button and the Triform rips the two men apart, breaking the Doctor's heart and giving him the drive to find his lost lover at any cost. But in reality, it's a guy he just met who he thinks is hot. He flirted with him a bit, they shared a kiss, and now he's gone. It happens so quickly that I don't feel like the Doctor would truly latch onto him. And the fact that he puts on Rogue's ring at the end is... I just feel a little bit cringe, because he literally just met this guy. Like, why is he so attached to him? I just don't think it worked the way the writers thought it would. Okay, so I'm going to count The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death as one story, and thus judge them both together. For me, this failed as a season finale, as it just left me incredibly unsatisfied, and it also had some really silly things in it. I thought that The Legend of Ruby Sunday was stronger. It had the benefit of setting things up, leaving us on a cliffhanger, leaving us with promises that Empire of Death just failed to live up to. I actually kind of like the unit tower. I think it does feel a bit like it's out of the MCU, but it's a cool base of operations to have the unit team hang out in. It also gives us this awesome opening shot of the TARDIS flying into the tower. Bear in mind that the TARDIS could just materialise in the tower itself. I just think that the 15th Doctor wanted to make a show of it, and that feels super in character for him. Kate Stewart is always a delight to see. Gemma Redgrave has really cemented herself as one of the best characters in the Whoniverse, spanning through 5 regenerations of the Doctor, and it's just been announced that she's going to star in a spin-off named The War Between the Land and the Sea, and I'm very excited for that. This episode is also where we get the reveal of the character of Susan Triad. I actually kind of love this. The mysterious woman that we have seen so much of throughout the season but know so little about is suddenly one of the most famous people in the world. That's a lovely twist. It's also great to see Mel back in this episode. I think out of all of the classic companions to return, she is one of the best. Elizabeth Sladen will always be the best. The biggest part of this episode takes place in the time window, where we get this amazing moment from Ncuti. This is one of my favourite moments of the 15th Doctor so far. It has so much charm, this incredibly intelligent and wise man laughing at the silly humans because they can barely build a rudimentary time window. It's just funny, and I love it. And the time window itself is cool. Ruby and the Doctor digitally step into the past to try to find out who her mother is using old CCTV footage. But her face can't be seen. Bear this in mind. Everything else is rendered in such great detail, but her face is the only thing that is obscured. And then when the digital version of Ruby's mum gets too close to Ruby and the Doctor, this happens. Remember this. And then she mysteriously points towards the Doctor. Again, remember this. We then get the reveal that the unit guard on deck has disappeared. He's gone, and he's become this swirling black mist, which is very, very cool visually. Also, there's a reveal that the TARDIS is at the centre of this swirly black thing, and that's pretty huge. The Doctor then goes to approach Susan Triad, and he has this emotional breakdown beforehand. I'll touch on that later. So then we get to the climax of the episode. Things pop off. Triad starts her worldwide announcement and starts to glitch, going a bit crazy. The TARDIS is going mental. The newest unit employee called Harriet turns out to be called Harriet Harbinger, harkening back to what we saw in The Devil's Cord, and she gives a super creepy speech. She lists off all of the other gods in the pantheon of Discord, which is a nice little Easter egg, and it's finally revealed that Susan Technologies was an anagram of Sutek, the god of death, and we get this awesome manifestation of him in creepy dog form. The episode ends with Sutek claiming he will bring death to the Doctor and the whole universe. All in all, I actually like this episode. It sets up all of these interesting questions. Who is Ruby? Who is Susan Triad? Who is Mrs. Flood? There was a creepy scene with her in this episode as well. How is Sutek attached to the TARDIS? And how is the Doctor going to defeat him? There are so many questions that need to be answered in the last episode, and unfortunately, I think the finale totally drops the ball. Strap in, folks, I'm going to find it hard to be positive about this one. So the finale starts off with Sutekh just basically killing everyone in the universe, apart from Ruby, the Doctor, and Mel. The Doctor and Mel make it back to Unit HQ, completely unharmed, outrunning the oncoming death dust cloud. They make it to the time window, and this is where he gets confronted by Sutekh. The whole scene where the Doctor gives the exposition about Sutekh, showing clips from his last encounter with him as the Fourth Doctor, feels super clunky. The pace of the scene grinds to a halt as we watch the clips, the Doctor explaining to Ruby, but mainly the audience, who Sutekh is. But, to be fair, it's quite important that this exposition is given, because it's important that we as an audience know who Sutekh is. Sutekh explains that after he was cast into the time vortex by the Doctor, he managed to cling to the TARDIS itself, binding with the machine. The TARDIS is one with Sutekh, and he can bend it to his will. That's pretty scary. This means that Sutekh has been with us since the Pyramid of Mars, latched onto the TARDIS. He's been through a lot. Speaking of TARDISes, the memory TARDIS is a neat little device that from a meta perspective allows old Doctors and companions to meet again on screen. It's a form of memory therapy for the Time Lords. And I guess the logic kind of makes sense. If time is a memory, then memory is a time machine, kind of. But I think that it appearing here in the way that it doesn't make much sense. I don't know how and why Ruby is the one that causes it to manifest, but I can look past that. But the biggest problem I have with the memory TARDIS is this. It has bits and pieces of every TARDIS we've seen the Doctor use, so it is surely a memory of the Doctor's TARDIS specifically. So why is Sutekh not also attached to this TARDIS as well? Surely, if Sutekh is bound to the Doctor's TARDIS, he is woven into the very essence of the time machine. The memory TARDIS, that is a memory of the Doctor's TARDIS, should contain the memory of Sutekh's essence as well. So why is this memory TARDIS unbound from Sutekh? Does that make sense? That is the biggest problem I have with the memory TARDIS. Anyways, this is when we get the explanation of Susan Triad and how she was created by Sutekh in an effort to destroy the universe. Every time the TARDIS lands, a copy of Susan was created. Sutekh explains that he gave her that name as a way to lure in the Doctor, to trick him, to mock him, as it is the name of his granddaughter. This means that there will have been thousands and thousands of Susan Triads that have been created over time. The Doctor says that with each rebirth, the idea of Susan Triad got stronger. I'm confused at how this really works. It's said that when the TARDIS lands, a Susan is made with a whole history and personality. So does she then disappear when the TARDIS takes off and leaves? That can't be the case, as Susan Triad is around at the end of the episode, and I assume she doesn't just disappear when the Doctor heads off. We also see a Susan variant at the start of Wild Blue Yonder, before the TARDIS appears, so they obviously get put into history and are real people. So how did no one notice? I get the idea of the perception filter making her blend in with her surroundings, but there would be so many of them, and so many Susan Triads on Earth for that matter, within the same time. I bet you there are hundreds of Susan Triads of a similar age roaming around the Earth at the same time as the main Susan Triad of Triad technologies. Someone would notice this, especially because the TARDIS would disappear and the perception filter would go with it. Don't get me wrong, I do like the initial idea, these angels of death being spread around by the Doctor's inherent actions of travelling around the universe. I think that's cool. I just think this explanation opens up so many holes. Do we know how many times the TARDIS has landed on Earth? Also, does that mean that every time the TARDIS lands on an empty spaceship, where the Doctor and his companion should be the only people around, like in Wild Blue Yonder, that there is actually always a Susan Triad just around the corner? That's just silly. So they run off into the memory TARDIS and manage to get it flying, and they escape Sutekh. And here the Doctor has this realization that he has brought death to everything. every world he has touched, every place he has visited, it's been destroyed. And he has this breakdown. Again, I'll touch on this a little bit later. Then there is a scene with a woman and a spoon. It's a good scene, it's very well acted, and it goes to show us what has become of the universe. Time itself seems to be decaying, timelines being destroyed, memory being erased. I guess that's the point of the scene, but it just feels pretty disconnected, and I'm sorry to say, but it feels a little pointless. We get the sense that time is being destroyed through Mel and her memory fading, so even though I did enjoy watching this scene, it feels very weird and unnecessary. Back in the memory TARDIS, and the Doctor figures out the reason Sutekh is keeping them alive, because he doesn't know who Ruby's mum is, because her face was hidden. The god of death needs to know who Ruby's mum is because it's the one thing he doesn't know. So Ruby's mum must be someone crazy then, powerful enough to evade the god of death himself. Also, a little nitpick here. Sutekh says that he can find the living through time and space, and family. That's how he finds Mel. That's how he gets into Mel's head. That's how he possesses Mel and sort of uses her as a puppet. Mel is in the memory TARDIS, probably light years away from him, and he says he can find anyone who is alive through time and space. I feel like there is some shenanigans that Sutekh can do to just find out who Ruby's mother is. If he can find the living throughout all time and space, why can't he find Ruby's mother and use the TARDIS to either go to her or to bring her to him? I just think the plot holes get worse and worse as the episode goes on. Through the use of the screen from the time window, Ruby sees an interview from the future of Roger ap Gwilliam, the future Prime Minister we saw Ruby go up against in 73 Yards. He implemented a nationwide DNA test for the UK, so they go to 2046 to try and find Ruby's mum on this database. So they go to the database and they get in because the Doctor made the security. And that is something I can totally believe. I love little details like that show the Doctor inserting himself into the history of the human race. We then see Mel get possessed by Sutekh, and the snow and the carols from the night Ruby was abandoned comes back. This is never explained. The snow is never explained. I guess it has something to do with the memory of that evening bleeding into reality. Probably due to Sutekh's connection to the TARDIS and time vortex and his desire, warping reality itself, focused around Ruby and who her mother is. That's the best explanation I have. It might be explored next season. So, Sutekh then brings Ruby and the Doctor to him. Harriet uses the TARDIS to teleport them. That is new. I guess it could be forgiven due to Sutekh being able to bend the TARDIS's will to his own, but we've never seen people be able to teleport other people to the TARDIS. And also, Mel just sort of gains a cloak. Through the teleportation, the cloak just appears, and I guess that's some magical death shenanigans going on right there. Again, it's just a bit silly, really. Then we get to the final action scene. The Doctor uses the whistle from the memory TARDIS to make the real TARDIS shoot a laser beam into the wall so it gets flung away from Sutekh. I thought he was attached to the TARDIS, hence why he didn't stop holding onto it throughout the whole episode. They then attach some intelligent rope to Sutekh's collar, hold it with the intelligent glove, and then attach it to the TARDIS. They then fly him into the time vortex. The Doctor uses Sutekh to bring death to death, undoing all the destruction and death throughout the universe. That happens because Sutekh's hand hits the edge of the vortex and, I guess, kills death. And then the Doctor snaps the rope, casting Sutekh into the vortex for good. We then end up back in Unit HQ, where we finally get told who Ruby's mum really is. All of the season has been building to this. The Doctor doesn't know who she is, Ruby doesn't know who she is, the time window cannot see her, even the literal god of death could not see her, and we finally find out that she is just a normal woman called Louise Miller. She had a hood on, and that managed to cover her face. And she didn't actually point to the Doctor, she was actually pointing to the sign behind the Doctor, the sign of Ruby Road, to name the child she just abandoned, because obviously everyone is going to check the CCTV and see her point to the sign to suggest that Ruby is called Ruby. Like, what? I understand Russell T Davies wanted to subvert expectations here. As the Doctor said, she was important because we made her important, but no! Russell T Davies made her important. He wrote her to be that way, and that's why we thought she was important, and now she's nothing really different or special. She's just a person, and yes, that is a lovely message. But it's so unsatisfying for us as an audience. Everything was pointing to something more significant. If you set it up to be something, don't make it then be nothing, purely just to point at the audience and laugh at them saying, I can't believe you thought it was going to be something significant. You know? Frustratingly disappointing. But look, I have to say that the scene with Ruby and her mum is lovely. It is a beautiful scene, it's cleverly written, and it's acted really well. And so the episode ends with the Doctor and Ruby parting ways as Ruby goes to spend some time with her mum. We then get a glimpse of Mrs. Flood, who talks to the camera as it snows. She is defo going to be someone really important, and I actually like how they've been sort of drip feeding her creepiness into the story. Okay, so as you can tell, I think that's a bit of a mess. I really dislike those last 2 episodes. Again, I hate being negative, but I just don't think they work. So when we look at the season as a whole, we have a week 2 opening episodes, 2 fantastic episodes, Boom and Dot and Bubble. 37 Yards was great, but now it doesn't really make sense because Ruby turned out to be just a normal person. Rogue, which was okay but flawed, and a terrible 2-part finale. That's not great, guys. Look, I like Ncuti Gatwa. I think he is the best part of the show by far, though I don't really understand the characterization of the 15th Doctor yet. In The Giggle, we see him super in tune with his emotions, basically talking the 14th Doctor into rehab. He comes into this season with a joy and exuberance, but also a fragility that is a lovely touch. But he cries in basically every episode, which just seems a lot. It makes him feel sort of erratic and actually not in touch with his emotions, not being able to keep it together and persevere. Again, I like the Doctor being sensitive, but I think it needs to be used more sparingly to give it more effect. Dot and Bubble's breakdown is great. The situation calls for that sort of reaction. The breakdown in Legend of Ruby Sunday feels a bit forced. Yes, Chidozi died because the Doctor told him to go and investigate, but it's not like he killed him. It's not like he knew him. I get the principle of the Doctor not accepting any death on his watch, and thematically, to see him get so worked up over one person's death makes his reaction to the scale of death he caused in the finale a bit more believable, but here it feels too much. And then yeah, the breakdown in the finale, I agree the Doctor would have a pretty visceral response. I just don't like how it's executed. Him screaming like a child into space just feels unlike him. Think back to Capaldi's anger and grief in Death in Heaven, where he finds out Missy has lied about Gallifrey. He just starts hitting the TARDIS console. It isn't erratic, it's a controlled outburst of rage, and the fact that he is expressing himself through physical violence, which is so unlike the Doctor, makes the moment have much more impact. I just think they could have expressed 15's grief and anger here much better. And then there's my ambivalence to Ruby Sunday. Like, I don't think Millie Gibson herself is bad. I think she does a good job with what she's given. She's really good in 73 Yards. I just think Ruby is a boring character. Like, I don't really have much else to say. As I've said before, her relationship with the Doctor never really felt real, and when they said goodbye to each other, I didn't really feel much. Wow. Guys, I'm sorry, that was a big downer of a video. It just makes me sad. I was just so hoping that this was going to be a banger of a season. But regardless of this, I did enjoy it. Like, the highs of this season surpassed that of the last 5 years of Who, and the lows were nowhere near as low as Doctor Who has recently stooped to. It just felt a bit messy. It's things like, you know, the Doctor has got a jukebox in his TARDIS and it just wasn't used once. Like, that's just sloppy. Anyway, I promise the next few videos are going to be positive. I think I'm going to look at some of the best parts of this season and the 60th anniversary specials, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I thought I'd also let you guys know that I actually have a Patreon account. At the moment, I make these videos purely for the joy of it. I make very little revenue from this channel, but it does take up a lot of time and energy. So if you'd like to go above and beyond and support me financially, that would blow my mind. But you can find a link to my Patreon down below. Please do not feel like there is any obligation to do so. I don't really expect anyone to do so, but I had my first paid member join last week and that was awesome. The fact that someone is willing to give me just like £1 a month to support this little channel is mind-blowing, so thank you so much. It would be mental if I could get to the point where this YouTube channel could actually bring in enough to support me financially, but that's a fair way off, but you know, we dream big. Anyway, thanks for getting this far in the video, guys. I hope this shift in tone didn't put too many people off. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below what you thought of the season as a whole. I'd love to hear what you guys thought about it. That's all for this one. I'll see you on the next video. Bye!